Bop bop. Okay, we're fine now. We're fine. Garnet blue screened, but we're fine. Alright? Unfortunate. It had been a long time since Garnet has actually ever blue screened. So, I don't know what to take that as. But, we're going to continue Yamazaki's route and get through as much as we can in the next 2 hours. Oh god, this feels weird. There's a bandage on my thumb. So, this is a little weird. Chapter 4. Alright. Let's continue. I couldn't give an immediate answer. It wasn't that I was doubting Sen and Kimigiku, but...
そうか。我々の前では何かと話しにくいかもしれないな。よかったら千姫さんと二人で話してくるといい。
近藤さん、そいつは。
Hijikata-san tried to protest, but Kondo-san didn't change his expression.
せめて誰か一人立ち会うべきでしょう。あちらも君菊さんに同席してもらえばいいのですし。
まあいいじゃないか。我々は今までずっと彼女の意思を無視し続けてたんだしな。彼女がここを出たいというのであれば止めることなどできんだろ
う。Kondo-san。
たく、相変わらず甘いんだな、あんたは。
ま、近藤さんが言うんじゃ仕方ないですよね。
His words spoke for the rest of them as well. They may not look they may not like it, but Kondo-san was the chief. What he said went. But it was above his title alone. I think his personality usually won out these sorts of issues.
二人きりになった途端、そのまま彼女を連れ去るなどということはないでしょうね。
心配は無用です。鬼は一度交わした約束は守りますから。
I'll be fine. Sen isn't a bad person.
ありがとう。
When she smiled, her expression had returned to that of a girl her age. A few moments later, we found ourselves alone in my room.
突然押しかけられた上、いろいろなことを言われて混乱したでしょう。ごめんなさいね。本来ならこんなやり方はしないんだけど。
No, it's alright. I'm sorry about, you know, them. They said some pretty mean things.
まあ、あれぐらいは予想してたから。いきなりあんな話を信用しろって方が無茶だもんね。鬼と呼ばれる生き物が本当に存在してるなんて簡単に信じられる人間はそうそういないし。それよりもさっきの提案どうかな。ちゃんと考えてみてくれる？
I had indeed. If Sen had come to me when I first arrived in Kyoto, I might well have taken her up on her hospitality. But now...
新選組の人たちはあなたを守れると言ってたけど、私は無理だと思う。
Perhaps what she said was true. The Shinsengumi were powerful and skilled. I'd seen them face overwhelming odds and emerge victorious, but those odds had always been only human. The strength of even a single demon was something great and terrible. Of that there was no doubt. We had all seen so firsthand, and some had even lost their lives to the strength. And the same fate could occur even to the captains of the Shinsengumi.
今後、今日の政局はますます混乱するはずよ。そんな時に風間がやってきたらどうなると思う？あなたは新選組から離れるべきだわ。そうすれば彼らも心置きなく戦える。
Sen. Her eyes were serious but warm and honest. Whatever else she might be, her concern for me was real. Thank you, Sen, but... I hesitated. I just couldn't get myself to agree.
もしかしてここから離れたくない理由でもあるの？
うん。
誰か心に思う人がいるとか。
What? My voice cracked. That's great. Her question had been entirely innocent, although it had caught me off guard. I couldn't possibly lie to her. What should I tell her? Yes. I nodded and did my best to look confident. She seemed a little surprised, but she eventually looked relieved and softened up.
そっか。それが誰なのかまでは聞かないけど、あなたが一人の女の子として見つけたものがここにはあるのね。それなら離れろなんて言えるはずないか。
Thank you for waiting.
どうだった？結論は出たかな？
Before I could speak, Sen stepped forward.
はい。彼女のことをこれまで通りよろしくお願いします。
Sen,
姫様、よろしいのですか？本当に。
ええ、もう決めたことだから。今は彼女の意思を優先しましょう。
分かった。そういうことなら今後も我々新選組が責任を持って彼女の身を預からせてもらおうじゃないか。
まあ大船に乗ったつもりで任せとけって。
新八の船は泥船だけどな。しかしまあよかったな。
Dan!
ここに残るなんて君も物好きだね。肝が据わってるのか、単に鈍感なだけなのか。
言っておくが、客人扱いする気はねえからな。お前の対応は
Alu!
今までと同じだ。
Right. Thank you, all of you, for letting me stay. Sen took my hands in hers and let her eyes rest on mine.
くれぐれも気をつけてね。私はいつでもあなたの味方だから。
Well, I tried streaming once and Garnet crashed at the blue screen. But things are fine now. Whatever happened is gone, and we can continue on our adventure. Thank you, Sen. She gave me one last warm smile, and then Sen and Kimigiku were gone. Once again, sleep refused to come. My mind worked furiously, turning over everything Sen had told me, examining it from every angle. I was a demon. Not only that, but I was the head of a pure-blooded demon clan that was nearly destroyed, my heritage being the reason for Kazuo's continued interest. Gosh. I had decided to stay with the Shinsengumi, but was that really the best idea? Should I have left instead? I'd wanted to stay, of course, and I didn't really think leaving was a reasonable choice, but what if I'd made a mistake? I heard a sound from outside and it made me jump. That sound, could it be?
Yukimura-kun, 夜分遅く失礼します。
I heard Shimada from the hallway. Hi? The door snapped open as Shimada stepped in. His eyes darted back and forth nervously, and his body was tense. Right, so I think the thing that I had in my head that I was thinking happened during the Fury Tech might actually be happening now. What do you mean my voice acting sounds way too fitting? Has something happened?
はい。鬼たちが屯所に襲撃をかけてきました。
What?
奴らの狙いは君です。この部屋でじっとしていてください。
But I was the reason they'd come here. How could I justify sitting on my hands while others fought my battles for me? I didn't know what to do. Well, the answer is stay in my room. All right. I'll stay here. So please help everyone else, Shimada. Although I'd only encountered them a few times, I knew just how powerful the demons could be. Huh. Alright. I was sure the more Shinsengumi men there were, the chances of their survival were better.
いえ、俺は君を護衛するよう命じられてきました。
Just then, the sounds of blades clanging against one another rang outside the room.
君は部屋に隠れていてください。俺が様子を見てきます。
Alright, now let's see if my brain was right or making shit up again. Okay, please be careful. Natural, huh? Shimada grabbed his sword's hilt on his hip, but immediately after... I feel so much for Shimada every time we reach this part in the game. Ugh. Shimada! I ran to the door to see what happened to him. But what should I do? Remain in the room! Shimada had told me to stay hidden in the room, so I have to obey what he said. But something is definitely happening outside of this room. My hands wouldn't stop trembling from fear.
Yukimura-kun. Yukimura-kun wa iru ka?
It's the best boy! The best boy is here! I heard my name from the other side of the sliding door. It was a familiar voice. Yamazaki-san? Yes, I'm here! Okay, but Shimada is...
分かっている。だが、敵はまだこの辺りにいる。君は部屋の明かりを消して、何があっても声を立てる。いいな。
Hi. Just as Yamazaki-san had said, I blew out all the candles in the room. Just then, I could sense the air on the other side of the door change, and it made my arm hairs stand.
あの娘はどこにいる？残念だったな。すでに彼女は安全な場所に逃れている。ではそこをどけ。断る。この先に行かせるわけにはいかない。よし。邪魔をするな。
I had heard a giant thud and the room and the doors shook after Yamazaki-san was thrown. And right after, Yamazaki flew into the room. Yamazaki-san!
声を立てるな。
Yamazaki-san stopped me from trying to leave my corner of the room by covering me. Yamazaki and I are in a location where we can't be easily spotted from the hallway. However, I could still sense Kazuma from beyond the door. If we had moved, even just a little, he would be able to find us. In order to save ourselves, Yamazaki and I had no choice but to stay completely still and silent. This is the scene that I was remembering. Oops. The air was so tense that we had to stop breathing. I wasn't sure how long we'd been in the room. Eventually, Kazuma seemed like he grew bored, walking away as the sounds of his footsteps grew further and further away.
奴は行ったか。
Hi. Even though my voice was filled with relief, Yamazaki-san seemed much more unsettled.
くそ、何もできなかった。
No, you've protected me.
この部屋に来なかったのはたまたまだ。俺には奴を倒せるどころか、足止めする力もないのか。俺に力があれば、もっと力が。
After it seemed as though Kazuma was no longer anywhere to be seen, I helped Yamazaki-san stand. He still seemed a little weak, his legs wobbling from being thrown earlier.
今のうちに君は安全なところに、仲間の元に逃げろ。
No, I can't leave you behind, Yamazaki-san.
俺のことは構うな。
But you're my comrade too. Well, because you're my comrade too, Yamazaki-san. I can't leave my comrade behind.
そうか。俺を仲間と言ってくれるのか、君は。
You're protecting me. You are very dear to me.
ありがとう。考えようによっては、下手に逃げるより、ここにいる方が安全かもしれない。
You may be right. Comrade. Battle brother.
しかし、状況はどうなっているんだ。
Yamazaki-san peeked outside the room from a window, but we couldn't hear any more swords clashing. However, we could hear footsteps approaching.
雪村君、早く奥に。
But you're injured, Yamazaki-san.
俺は大丈夫だ。君は早く。
As I was shuffling to hide myself in the corner, I saw someone jumping into the room.
おお、雪村君。よかった、無事だったか。
Oh, it's just Gen. Inoue! Inoue took a look at both me and Yamazaki-san, and he sighed in relief.
怪我はないかい？
I'm fine, but Yamazaki-san...
そうか。山崎君が彼女を守ってくれたのか。山崎君、ありがとう。怪我は大丈夫かね？
ええ、なんとか。それより奴は。
ああ、みんなが頑張ってくれたおかげで追い返すことができたよ。
そうですか。それは良かったです。
もし怪我が大丈夫のようなら、一緒にトシさんのところに行ってくれるかい？
わかりました。俺は副長のもとに君の安全を伝えてくる。君はこのまま部屋にいてくれ。
Hi. Yamazaki-san and Inoue left my room and headed for Hijikata-san. What was most concerning to me was Yamazaki-san's perplexed expression before Inoue arrived. He looked almost... upset. I mean, he was up against Kazuma, which was no normal feat, especially for a human. After time passed to the following day. Ohaya, Mina.
ああ、おはよう雪村君。ゆうべはよく眠れたかい？
Oh, yes.
無理はしなくていいよ。寝不足なのは顔を見ればわかるからね。
How's Shimada doing?
打ちどころが悪くて気を失っただけだ。怪我は内身程度で大したことはない。今後のタイムにも特に支障はないだろう。
Really? What a relief.
島田君も言っていたよ。役に立てず申し訳なかったとね。
Say it with me now. Shimada needs a root! Poor Shimada. What? I'm the one who should be apologizing to him.
おや、イサミさん、おはよう。どうしたんだね。機嫌が悪そうだが。
Give Shimada a root, damn it.
もともといかつい顔なのに、それじゃ迫力満点だ。雪村君も怖がっているじゃないか。
No, I'm not scared.
別に遠慮する必要はねえぜ。怖いなら素直に怖いって言っとけよ。
But I wasn't saying...
それはすまなかったな。タイはないから許してほしい。
He gave me a tight grin, but then looked down, his face grim. I wonder what was the matter. He's acting different. Please, don't apologize. Please, just tell us what happened.
すぐにわかることだから伝えておこう。
He wasn't just talking to me anymore. The rest moved closer to hear what he had to say.
西本願寺からこれ以上我々がここに留まるのは困ると言ってきた。
We're being kicked out!
それはつまり我々にここから出て行けとそういうことですか？
いや、さすがにそこまで直接的な物言いではなかった。
まあいつかはそうなるんじゃないかと思ってはいたがね。いやはやしかし困ったね。
The monks at the Nishihonwanji temple were imperialists and allies of the Choshu. They've never been fond of the Shinsengumi, but we decided to force our way into their temple anyway. It was no surprise they wanted us out, but I'd finally begun to feel like the temple was my home. I was sure I wasn't the only one who felt that way.
それにしても急な話ですね。まさか昨晩の騒ぎが原因ですか？
ああ、ここであのような騒ぎを起こされては困るということらしい。察するに長州や薩摩、その辺りからも何か言われているのだろうな。
The ruckus last night was all because Kazuma and his men wanted to abduct me. I'm sorry. This is all my fault.
そうではないさ。もともと無理難題を言ってここに押しかけたのは我々なんだからな。
しかしどうするのですか？屯所移転となるとまた候補地選びからやり直しになりますが。
それについてだな。移転先の敷地も屯所も全部西本願寺が用意してくれるそうだ。
What?
おお、そりゃすごい。よっぽど我々に出て行ってほしいんだね。
まあ、ここは素直に受け取っておいた方が良さそうだな。また忙しくなるぞ。
A plot of land was purchased and a new compound was built, all paid for by the Nishihonwanji temple. It became the third headquarters of the Shinsengumi, the Fudoto village location. In the new location, there was a big bath where a dozen or so warriors could bathe together, and even a new dojos. The new warriors were clearly excited about it. By the time summer came, the Shinsengumi had left Nishihonwanji, where they spent more than 2 years. (1867) July. Let me see. Oh, I know what we're doing. July 1867. Knowing better than to stay, the Shinsengumi agreed to Nishihonwanji's request and transferred their headquarters to Fudoto. We had to travel south from the temple at Nishihonwanji to reach Fudoto village. Whoa! My first glimpse of our new home surprised me so much that I had to stand there for a few minutes to take it in. Pristine and in working order, the huge compound stood proudly upon a fair-sized piece of land. There had to be so much space inside that even after the rest of the men joined us, there would be room to spare. There was even a watchtower. It must have been comparable in scale to a daimyo's mansion, and the thought left me awestruck. This is our new headquarters?
ああ、その通りだ。これからはここが我ら新選組の本拠となる。
広さも申し分ない。余計なやつの目もねえし、これからはいろいろと楽になるな。
The stern look on Hijikata-san's face appeared to have vanished today. In fact, he looked to be in a pretty good mood. But his upbeat attitude was nothing next to Kondo-san's. 'Cause look at him! He is all smiles and sunshine!
そうだ。 雪村君はまだ豚書の中を見ていないのだったな。
No, I haven't.
そうかそうか。ではせっかくだから俺が豚書を案内しよう。
Whoa. Alright, how expensive? Huh? But you must be really busy with setting things up. You don't have the time. I wasn't sure it was such a good idea, but his smile was so infectious and he nearly danced from eagerness. I felt my resistance crumbling. Hijikata-san's eyes slid to the side to watch his chief. He grinned wryly and shrugged.
おとなしく案内してもらっとけ。一条っていうには少々足りねえが、一国一条の主ってのは男の夢だからな。近藤さんも誰かに見せたくてしょうがないんだろうよ。
Okay. I'd be honored to have a tour, Kondo-san.
任せておいてくれ。さて、まずはどこから案内したものか。クリアも風呂も実に広くてな。
Every new house came with a certain sense of anticipation, and this one was no different. Dan, what have you found at the shop? I'm curious. It was with building excitement that I stepped inside after Kondo-san, my head swiveling from side to side to take everything in.
さて、まずはやはり君の資質を紹介しておかんとな。
Jesus, that's a lot. Holy shit. Alright. This is my room? The new mats on the ground filled the room with a fresh scent, and the sunbeams that danced inside brought warmth and a sense of peace. The door design looked slightly fancier too, as if they wanted to give me a little something extra.
どうだろう。気に入ってもらえただろうか。
Of course! I jumped to reassure him, and his smile widened when he realized I approved of their choice. But is all of this okay? I'm not a member, and yet you're letting me have such a grand room.
いやいや、気にすることはないぞ。今回の豚書は普通の大使も余裕を持って生活できる広さになっている。それに五両エジが抜けて部屋にも空きがあるからな。
Oh. Oh God. For a brief moment, Kondo-san's happy expression faded into a somber one. I had a feeling that he was thinking about Heisuke and Saito-san right then. I knew I was. I opened my mouth to say something, but before I could, his face cleared and he continued speaking.
ともかく広さについては心配ない。西本願寺も広かったが、あそこは我々に好意的とは言えなかったからな。先方にもみんなにも心苦しい思いをさせた。それに比べれば、ここは気兼ねなく暮らせるというものだ。
You're right. We had only been borrowing space at all of the previous locations, Yagi and Nishihowanji, and had to abide by the wishes of our sponsors. But now... Huh. Alright. I could only imagine the emotions swirling through Kondo-san with this new place.
さてと、では次にどこを案内するとしようか。
What other rooms are here?
そうだな。お、そういえば今度の豚書には立派な道場があるぞ。ぜひ見てくれ。
With a grin and jaunty bounce to his step, he began to walk off when suddenly he came to a halt, calling over his shoulder to me.
その前に少し寄り道をしていって構わないかな。
Curious, I followed him through the maze of hallways until we reached... Is this Okita's room? The interior looked a lot like mine, but there was something... It was hard to explain, but the room felt like him. Almost as if I could turn around and he'd be right behind me, grinning. Because he fucking would.
ああ。しかし、掃除のやつはどこかに行ってしまったようだな。
Bye, Dan. Bye-bye.
まったく、部屋でおとなしく療養しろと言っておいたのに。
Ever since Okita fell ill, both Kondo-san and Hijikata-san had been keeping a closer eye on him, and often made time to see how he was doing. I realized that was why we had stopped in his room. Kondo-san was worried and wanted to mask it with a visit. You're a kind man, Kondo-san. You're always looking out for everyone.
ん？そう言われると照れるが、掃除は大使の中でも特別だ。何しろ俺は掃除が9つの頃からずっとあいつの成長を眺めてきた。俺にとっては弟のようなものだからな。
His voice softened and warmed. A faraway look came to his eyes. His fondness for Okita was obvious to anyone who bothered to pay attention. When he caught me looking at him, a smile on his face, he scratched his cheek and turned slightly red, chuckling.
おっと、いかんいかん。ここで話していては案内が終わらないな。それでは改めて道場に向かうとしよ
う。はい。We made our way down a few more hallways until Kondo-san finally slid a large door open. Oh! The new training room was so spacious. 1 or 2 dozen warriors could easily train together with plenty of room to move around. It's so big, I can't believe it.
そうだろう、そうだろう。
The wood floor beneath my feet felt cool. It would have been relaxing if the room hadn't already been full of frenetic energy.
おお、気の早い大使たちが早速稽古を始めているようだな。感心感心。
Perhaps it was the new location, but a number of the warriors were eager to test the room's capabilities. The air was filled with the sound of bamboo sticks slapping each other and the scuffle and stomp of feet. One person in the crowd noticed us standing near the door. He separated himself from the group and approached.
おや、珍しい組み合わせだね。豚書の中を見て回っているのかい？
Konnichiwa, Inoue. How goes training?
ああ、やはり新しい道場というのは気分がいいからね。それに、外が雨でも鍛錬ができるのは実にありがたいことだ。
Oh, that's right. Everyone had to practice back outside at the temple. Suddenly, Inoue-san flipped his practice stick over and extended the hilt towards Kondo-san.
どうだい、イサミさん。あんたも軽く汗を流していっては。
うん。そうしたいのは山々だが、今は雪村君を案内しているからな。
Oh, it's fine. Don't worry about me. I'll wait over here and watch.
そうか。では、お言葉に甘えて、少しだけ稽古でもしていくとするか。
Striding into the throng of men, he was quickly surrounded by them as they all exchanged greetings. Before long, the training resumed. The intensity and difficulty exponentially increased, now that their chief was among them. You did great, Kondo-san. You must be tired. Please sit and have some tea.
ああ、ありがとう。しかし、ずいぶん道場で時間を取られてしまったか。
He took a seat in a new common room, which was centrally located for easy access by all members.
君にはすまないことをしたな。もっとゆっくりいろんな場所を案内してあげたかったのだが。
It's all right. Today is only the first day we're living here. We can look around more anytime we want. I giggled and Kono-san's lips curled into a smile. For a few moments, he sat quietly, savoring his tea.
いいものだな。こうして皆を迎え入れることができる家があるというのは、長年の夢がまた一つ叶った気分だよ。
Another?
ああ、俺は侍になってお上のために刀を振るうのが昔からの夢だった。
He took a sip of his tea and quietly sighed. His face was turned towards me, but his eyes were soft and unfocused, gazing into his memories. Memories of happier times. I didn't know much about the history Kondo-san and the other Shinsengumi captains shared. Sometimes I'd catch one of the older men talk about the early days, and every time they'd wax nostalgic for the life they used to live. It made me sad that I'd only joined them recently, and wasn't able to share in those happy, peaceful memories.
幼い頃は剣術の真似事をするたび、農家の息子が剣を持つなんてと笑われたものだがね。
But you proved them wrong. You fulfilled your dream of being a warrior, right? The Shinsengumi had done their utmost to do everything in their power to keep the city of Kyoto safe. As their chief, Kondo-san's efforts had been finally recognized, and he'd been granted increased responsibilities by the shogunate.
ああ、その意味では俺の夢は叶った。だから次は俺と同じような夢を持つ奴らに道を開いてやりたいんだ。
How?
そう。お上を敬う気持ちと剣の腕があれば、身分に関係なく侍に取り立ててもらえる。新選組をそんな場所にしたいんだよ。
Kondo-san. His feelings on the matter were overwhelming me. The Shinsengumi had the focus of all of his energy. What was that? The Shinsengumi was the force of all of his energy. He cared deeply for every member and every warrior who dreamed of the same thing he did. His bright smile faded.
ただ、侍を目指すという形だと、侍の立場が嫌で脱藩した長倉君や原田君には申し訳ないな。
When his lips twisted up wryly, I couldn't stop myself from speaking. Can I become one too? I was sure I couldn't guess at what Nagakura and Harada would think about it, but seeing Kondo-san sad was something my heart wouldn't leave alone. Do you think I could do it too? I couldn't stop myself from blurting out the question. I'd felt useless around the Shinsengumi more than once. They always took the time to look after me, and I hated being so powerless. If I was a samurai, maybe if I had studied more than the basics of sword fighting, I would have been able to help them. Everyone's feeling towards the Shinsengumi. Towards belonging to something important, had roused similar feelings in me. If, like you said, class and social standing have no bearing on becoming a samurai, then could I be a samurai too? His eyebrows shot up, but instead of dismissing me, he seemed to be considering it seriously. His voice was matter of fact when he replied.
ああ、君ならなれるかもしれないな。
I heard no laughter in his tone. He was being sincere. But then Kondo-san shook his head slowly.
しかし今は その気持ちだけで十分だ。個人的な意見だが、君のような優しい子は普通の女の子に戻って幸せになってほしい。そう思うよ、俺は。
A normal life. There was no doubt in his eyes that I would have that someday, and the smile he gave me was warm. I was at a loss for words. To think that he was so kind, that he would wish my future was a happy one, despite my being a demon causing trouble for the Shinsengumi. Tears threatened to spill over, but I rapidly blinked, determined to hold them back. The hours passed, and soon enough night came. I had finished my cleaning and was taking a moment to rest in my room. A brand new headquarters, a new room. Our headquarters had changed and expanded, matching the Shinsengumi's growth itself. But increasing in numbers is not always a good thing. The more people there were under one banner, the less likely all of them would hold the same beliefs and ideals. There would be differences and conflicting opinions, just like what happened with Ito and his men. But I didn't want the Shinsengumi to change. Kondo-san's dream sounded wonderful, and I could see it becoming true because of the men that had surrounded him. With those thoughts in my head, my first night in the Fudodo headquarters slowly passed. Oh no, we've reached November. November 1867. A gust of wind stripped some of the last stubborn leaves from the trees and sent them skittering across the Kyoto street. It was cold and it bit into me through my clothes. I shivered. It's almost winter, isn't it?
ああ、この時期の冷え込みはほんと厳しいなんてもんじゃねえよな。だが、今は昼だからまだマシだぜ。寒い夜の巡察がどれだけ辛いかっつうとな。
He laughed as his breath turned like smoke. My fingertips were icy cold and I blew my breath on them.
なんだ、寒いのか？手でもつないでやろうか？
No, I'm not that cold. I'll be fine. Oh? I noticed someone walking towards us.
よー、二人とも今日もいい天気だな。
こいつだけは寒さとは無縁だよな。
あ？やれによってその格好のてめえに言われる筋合いはねえぞ。
Their bickering might have looked odd to a passerby, but I knew it for the sign of deep friendship that it was.
なんだよ、そんなにニヤニヤして。
そりゃ、お前がいつも通りの間抜けな面を晒してるからに決まってるだろう。
No, it's just, I was just remembering when we met up like this before. Like the time we met Kyoto. I was with Okita and Heisuke then, though. More than 6 months had passed since Saito-san and Heisuke left to join the Guardians of the Imperial Tomb. Harada and Shinpachi faces turned grim as I trailed off. I shook my head, hoping vainly to cast off unpleasant thoughts. I just mean, there's been so much going on lately, it makes me feel nostalgic.
まあそうだな。世間もうちもいろいろあったからな。
しかしまさか俺たちが直参に取り立てられる日が来るとは思わなかったけどな。
It was right around the time when we moved our headquarters to Fudodo Village, right? I remember there were a handful of people who said they were going to leave, and it was a big debacle. There is a distinction, though, between those who were able to leave the Shinsengumi and then those who were forced to enter the Fury Corps. Kondo-san seemed to be thrilled about becoming promoted to a Jiki-san, but how do you guys feel about this?
まあ正直柄じゃねえよな。
別に幕府の家来になるために今まで戦ってきたわけでもねえしな。
These two do not like the samurai life. They came from samurai families and they don't like it one bit. Kono-san's promotion had changed the Shinsengumi's relationship with the daimyo. Where before we'd only be philosophically aligned with the shogun, now we answer directly to him. For some people, that was a serious problem. Rumors floated around as we began to move to our new headquarters. So, what's this going to change for us going forward? I heard that a few months ago that the Imperial Prince had become the new emperor. I think there was a restoration of imperial rule last month, right? Supposedly the Tokugawa shogun had returned power from the government to the emperor, right?
ああ、坂本龍馬が考えた策らしいな。おかげで戦をやって天下を取りたかった薩摩や長州の奴らから相当恨まれることになったらしいが。
幕府寄りの奴からはもともと嫌われてたから、日本中の老子から恨まれるようになったってことだな。
とはいえ、これで薩長側も戦をする大義名分がなくなっちまったし、今の調子でこのまま続いていくんじゃねえの？
将軍はそのまんまだし、徳川家が以前日本で一番でかい大名家だってことは変わりがねえしな。薩摩の奴らが何やら怪しげな動きを見せてやがるのが気にかかる
が。ま、幕府側が挑発に乗らなきゃどうってことはねえだろ。
I see. As I looked around the city, it seemed like he had a point. Nothing much seemed to have changed. Inns were still bustling with travelers. Tea shops were still smelling delicious. You could still smell the burning incense from the temples scattered throughout the town. Life continued just as it always had, regardless of what the shogun was or wasn't doing. The city might look the same as it always had, but time flowed on regardless, and a great wave was coming that would carry all of us away. I looked up at Nagakura and something occurred to me that I hadn't thought of before. Before I realized what I was doing, I opened my mouth. I didn't realize you were so smart, Nagakura. You know a lot about politics.
一つ聞いていいか？今まで何だと思ってたんだ、俺のこと。
Let's continue our rounds. It's winter, which means it'll get dark faster.
ごまかしてんな。
There was a man named Ryoma Sakamoto. He was a ronin from the Tosa domain and had aligned himself with the Satsuma and Sacho domains as well. For a time, the Kyoto Judiciary Commissioner, Mima Warigumi, and even the Shinsengumi were desperate to find him. After his orchestration of the restoration of imperial rule, however, orders were passed down to leave him alone. I had only a general idea of who he was and what he'd done, but even I had figured out that he was an important person, so when I heard Inoue mention him, I listened.
その坂本龍馬だが暗殺されたらしい。
本当かよ。一体誰がやったんだ？
坂本は敵が多いしな。幕府側も薩長側も個人的な恨みなら紀州の三浦ってやつとも揉めてたよな。
実は僕らが一番疑われてるんじゃない？どうせ他のやつに殺されるんなら僕が切っておけばよかったな。
おいおい、冗談に聞こえねえよ。つうか、俺らは手を出すなって言われてただろうが。
I never met Sakamoto. In fact, I barely knew who he was. But I felt somehow that his death would shake the country to its core.
みんなも知っての通り、私たちは勇さんから坂本龍馬に手を出さないように再三言われていた。だけど世間はそう見てくれてはいないようでね。なんでも現場に新選組大使の鞘が落ちていたらしい。今取り調べの問い合わせが来ているよ。
A scabbard? Is that really enough evidence?
どう考えても単なる言いがかりだろうよ。で、誰の鞘だって言ってるんだ？
それがね、君なんだよ、原田君。
What?
なんだ、佐野さんが切ったんだ。せっかくだから僕も呼んでほしかったな。
バカ言うんじゃねえよ。俺の鞘はここにあるんだぜ。作り話ならもっとうまくやれってんだ。ったく。
私もみんなも最初から君を疑ってなどいないよ。だがそういったところで世間が信じてくれるかどうか。こんな噂が流れるところを見ると、先方も犯人を絞りきれずにいるんだろうし、紀州藩の三浦九太郎が新選組に依頼して暗殺したなんて話もあったよ。
Miura. That was the man Nagakura had mentioned. He had some sort of personal quarrel with Sakamoto, which made him a suspect.
新選組の仕業ってことにしてやつもいるだろうしな。つっても俺たちが何も聞かされてねえ以上、新選組が手を下したってことはねえよ。
三男さんが勝手に動いたんだとしたら別ですけどね。
The room fell silent.
三男さんは大丈夫なのか？俺たちから見ても最近の夜の銃殺はやり方がひでえぜ。
It was true, Sana-san was acting stranger and stranger. Although I didn't want to believe it, I had to admit it was... Although I didn't want to believe it, I had to admit it wasn't that difficult to imagine him doing something like that. When I passed him on occasion in the hallways, his eyes were dry and thirsty, as if he was always hungry for blood.
俺らの方で気をつけるしかねえな。羅刹隊の存在を表に出すわけにはいかねえし。
その件についてだが、
お、近藤さんに土方さんって。
サイド、お前なんでここにいるんだよ。
I thought I was dreaming for a second. But there was no doubt. The man who'd followed Kondo-san and Hijikata-san into the room was the man who left to join the guardians of the Imperial Tomb, Saito-san himself.
おや、斉藤君じゃないか。久しぶりだね。ご両親の方はどうしたんだい？
What are you talking about, Inoue? There's no way Hijikata-san would allow anyone from the guard here. We're prohibited from even talking to them.
ごちゃごちゃうるせえな。許すも何も本日付で斉藤は新選組に復帰するんだよ。
I think the bleeding has stopped on my thumb, thank God. What?
え？いや、ちょっと待った土方さん。俺たちとしちゃ嬉しい頼りだけどよ。そんじゃご両英治っつうか伊藤派の立場はどうなるんだ？
まずそこから訂正を。俺はもともと伊藤派ではない。
斉藤君はな、都市の命を受けて患者として伊藤派に混じっていたんだ。
And with that, everything suddenly made sense. They say that to fool your enemy, you must first fool your allies, and Saito-san had been doing just that.
なんだ、はじめくん。僕に内緒でそんな楽しいことをしてたんだね。
さっきは肝が冷えたぜ。近藤さんたちも人が悪いよ。
極秘だったのでな。黙っていてみんなにはすまんことをしたな。
It was a surprise to be sure, but I was glad we'd have Saito-san back with us again. I gave him a tentative smile, but he only sighed and shook his head.
安心するのはまだ早い。この半年、俺は御領エジとして活動を続けていたが、伊藤たちは新選組に対し明らかな敵対行動を取ろうとしている。
敵対行動とは。
伊藤のやつは幕府を貶めるため羅刹隊の存在を公にしようとしてやがるんだ。そのために薩摩と手を組んだって話もある。
If the existence and creation of the monstrous Furies was to become public knowledge, the shogunate's reputation would be irreparably damaged, and the Shinsengumi would undoubtedly suffer as well. Even I could predict that.
そしてより差し迫った問題がもう一つ。伊藤派は新選組局長暗殺計画を練っている。
You mean Kondo-san? Kondo-san's face was tense, but he kept silent. He glanced over at Hijikata-san.
御領エジはすでに新選組潰しに動き始めている。坂本龍馬が暗殺された件は聞いたか？
ああ、何でも俺がやったとかいう話になってるらしいな。
聞いてるんなら話は早い。その噂を流したのは御領エジの連中だ。紀州藩の三浦九太郎が新選組に依頼して原田に殺させたってな。三浦には身に覚えがねえらしいが、噂を鵜呑みにしたバカが俺たちを襲ってこねえとも限らねえ。三浦の警護は斎藤に頼むことに。事情を知らねえ大使連中から見ると、斎藤は伊藤派から出戻りしたようにしか見えねえだろうから。
わきまえています。ほとぼりが冷めるまで俺はここにいない方がいいでしょう。
Here Hijikata-san paused for a moment. The room was utterly silent. Every one of us could sense that what came next would be very, very important.
伊藤化した。羅刹隊の存在を公にするだけでなく、近藤さんの命まで狙ってるときた。
He spoke quietly, almost to himself, as if sharing a final moment with a former comrade. Then he looked up, and when he spoke, his voice was like cold steel, the voice of a demon, of the demon.
残念なことだが、あの男には死んでもらうしかない。
やむを得まい。
Kono-san nodded, and that was that. The Shinsengumi would kill Kashitaro Ito.
まず伊藤を近藤さんの別宅に呼び出す。接待には俺も回る。その後伊藤の死体を使って御領エジの連中を呼び出し切る。実行隊は新八、原田、お前らに頼む。
土方さん、僕は誰を切ればいいんですか？
お前は寝てろ。相変わらず変な咳をしてやがるし、体調も悪いんだ。
So Soji gets to do nothing.
斎藤もまだ数日はここにいるから相手をしてもらえ。
近藤さんを殺そうとしてる人を暗殺するのに、僕に見せ場をくれないつもりですか？恨みますよ、土方さん。
It all seemed very calculated for murder. I hadn't realized I'd been sitting still in shock until I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder. Saito-san?
五両エジはこれで終わる。平助を呼び戻すつもりなら、これが最後の機会になるだろう。
He was right. If they meant to kill the guard, that included Heisuke. I couldn't keep sitting still, so I ran over to Hijikata-san. Hijikata-san,
なんだ
what are you going to do with Heisuke? He's part of the guard now.
それはもちろん助けるに決まって。
Nagakura said as if it was obvious, but got cut off.
歯向かうようなら切れ。
What? My mind went blank. I couldn't contain my heart from how fast it beat. No, you can't mean that. My voice started to shake. You're lying, right? I mean, you've known Heisuke for a long time. He's your friend. Hijikata-san stood up as if he wanted to push me away. And he left the common room. You're actually going to order them to kill Heisuke? So just because he left the Shinsengumi, are you saying you no longer care if he dies or not?
そんなはずがないだろう。年だって本心では助けたいと思っているんだ。同じ志を持って江戸から登ってきた仲間を殺す命令を下して平気でいられるはずがないだろう。
Kondo-san appeared to be gripping his fist so tightly that it almost looked like he was bleeding. That alone said it all. I realized in that moment how much Kondo-san was suffering, how much each one of them was suffering, even Hijikata-san. I'm sorry for saying that.
いや、君の立場ならああいうのが当たり前だ。平助はみんなに慕われているのだな。
Kondo-san let out a slow breath, then looked up at me and smiled. He turned to Nagakura and Harada and spoke in a low voice.
長倉君、原田君、局長ではなく近藤勇として頼む。平助を見逃してやってくれ。できるならタイに戻るよう説得してほしい。
ああ、分かってるさ。
あいつの命が俺たちの腕にかかってるってわけだな。責任重大だ。
What should I do? What could I do?
これで皆自分の役割は確認したな。もし質問があるなら今のうちに言っておいてくれ。
待って。Kondo-san turned around and looked very surprised. I haven't been given any orders. I would like to help.
手伝うと言っても今回の仕事は池田屋や金門の変の時とは違うんだよ。君はこんな役目には関わるべきでもない。
It was true. This wasn't a patrol or even a guarding mission. This was the assassination of a former comrade and an attack on men who'd split from the Shinsengumi. I still wanted to help. Still, I wanted to do what I could. It might be my last chance to see Heisuke. Please, let me go. I won't get in the way.
あのな、今回のは使いでも遊びでもねえんだ。
一時は同志だった奴らの暗殺だ。万が一のことがあれば平助だって切ることになるかもしれねえんだぜ。
I know. It's not something to be taken lightly. I knew that the Shinsengumi had carried out these sorts of black operations before. There was no way I could have stayed with them as long as I had and not known. But I couldn't just let them shoulder all the responsibility. I was done looking away until the deed was done. No more. Perhaps it's presumptuous of me to say so, but I consider myself a member of the Shinsengumi. And because we're going through this, I want to help everybody.
決意は固いようだ。
His face had lost his usual warmth. It wasn't anger or cruelty that it showed now, but the gravity of a general addressing his men.
ならばどうする？この一件において君は何をしたいんだね？
I had already decided I would. I'll do anything. I'll do anything.
何でもと言われてもそうだな。
That day, Kondo-san asked me to visit Matsumoto-sensei. Kondo-san had told me that I could return at whatever hour I wanted, so I took my time getting there, but I had a suspicion that this was their method of watching out for me to avoid my involvement with the assassination, if at all possible. The person who I had accompanied me was... I apologize, Yamazaki-san. I'm sorry that you have to come with me to the doctor's shop.
いや、問題ない。局長の考えは分かっているつもりだ。
No, it's not about that. I just think that if you weren't here, you'd be off doing something way more important.
そのことなら案じなくていい。俺がいなくても問題なく遂行されているはずだ。
そっか。When Yamazaki-san and I returned to the compounds, we heard many different voices chatting inside. I wonder what's going on.
いや、皆さんが帰ってきたようだ。
Inside there was a large commotion going on, and then we heard a familiar voice call out to us.
Yamazaki! 誰かいねえか?
I'll be right there! The tone of Nagakura's voice was alarmed, and it gave me a bad feeling. As I stepped into the dojo, which seemed to be the heart of the commotion, I was dumbfounded. Heisuke! Heisuke was sprawled along the floor, covered in his own blood. Okay.
長倉さん、これはどうしたんですか？
どうもこうもね、敵にやられた。すぐに平助を見てやってくれ。頼む。
ですが、この傷はひどすぎる。俺では無理です。すぐに松本先生のところに。
そんな猶予はありません。すぐに東堂君を奥に運んでください。
奥ってどういうことだよ。松本先生に見せるならこのまま外だろ。
このままでは松本先生のところに着く前に東堂君は死にます。長倉君はそれでもいいのですか？
いいわけねえだろ。けどよ、奥であんたがやろうとしてるのは何なんだよ。
彼を死なせたくない気持ちは私も同じです。
三男さん、あんた平助に落ち水を飲ませるつもりなのか？
それを決めるのは私ではありません。最後の判断は東堂君に任せようと思っています。
ふざけんじゃねえ。あんたは鬼か。
By this point, Nagakura was screaming furiously at Sanan-san, going so far as to point his sword at him.
私は鬼ではなく羅刹ですから、殺すつもりなら確実に心臓を狙うか首を落としなさい。
二人ともそんなことをしている場合じゃありません。このままでは東堂さんが。
分かってるよ、そんなことは。
では私に任せてもらいましょう。いいですね。
Nagakura sheathed his sword as if silently resigning to Sanan-san's suggestion.
くそー！
Nagakura left us with his last outburst. and he stormed off. Watching that, I remained here with Heisuke. I stayed behind and I timidly looked towards Sun-san. Sun-san looked back at me and we locked eyes for a minute.
あなたも私を鬼だと思いますか？どうぞ鬼だと思ってもらって結構です。ですが、今まさに死のうとしている命を救う手立てがあるのに、それをしないのはそれほど罪でしょうか。
Well, I couldn't find the words. What would my doctor of a father have done?
私の願いは東堂君に生きてほしいのです。あなたも私と同じ気持ちならこれ以上邪魔をしないでください。
I stopped Sun-san, apparently. Are you really going to honor Heisuke's wishes?
もちろんです。さあ、あとは私に任せて、あなたは部屋に戻りなさい。
Sun-san motioned for his men to carry Heisuke and the group of them disappeared. Was that the right thing to do? As I stood there, I wondered aloud. Yamazaki-san answered me, standing behind me as we waited alone.
雪村君、君の気持ちは痛いほどわかるつもりだ。今は東堂さんの意志が尊重されることを祈ろう。
There was nothing I could do or say, so I just nodded. The attack on the watch, as well as the assassination of Ito-san, later became known collectively as the Aburano Koji incident. An unexpected turn from both the demons and the Satsuma from their trap laying resulted in a number of casualties for the Shinsengumi and the watch, including Heisuke's fatal wound. In order for Heisuke to live, he had no choice but to drink the water of life. While this was all going on, Shikage Kazuma took the time to strike at the heart of our compounds. The serum, bound to the Shinsengumi by my father, was now slowly eating all of them away. My heart began sinking from the weight of all this. December 1867. Scarcely a month had passed since Aburano Koji. Sato-san and Heisuke had returned, but the Shinsengumi was hardly back to normal. A dark, tense atmosphere pervaded the compound. Many men had lost their lives in Kazuma's attacks. Even more had been injured during the attack at Aburano Koji. Among them was Heisuke. Several of the rank-and-file soldiers had seen him mortally wounded. He had looked as if he would not survive. For that reason, Heisuke was declared officially dead and made a member of the Fury Corps. Sato-san had been wounded, but many among the common soldiers began to call him a coward. To them, he had left the Shinsengumi to join Ito-san, then betrayed his new master when he sensed a change in fortune. I saw no reason why he shouldn't set them straight and say that he had never truly left the Shinsengumi, but he claimed he would rather stay silent than tarnish the honor of the commander and the chief who had ordered his actions. As such, it was decided that Sato-san would leave the compound until tempers had been allowed to cool. He was sent to stay at Tenma in order to protect Kyotaro Miura, an official of the Kishu domain. The night of the battle at Aburano Koji was a turning point for the Shinsengumi. For the men who didn't know the details, it was simply a battle against their former comrades, the guardians of the Imperial Tomb. Those better informed knew the situation with the Satsuma Choshu domains had changed, and Ryoma Sakamoto's hit was part of a big plan. Only the heads of the Shinsengumi knew the whole story. The activities of the demons, and Heisuke's transformation into a fury. They were... Yeah. They were also the only ones who knew that Okita's illness had gotten worse. Such an important battle had stirred up the atmosphere in the compound, and for several days there were excited men everywhere, shouting and talking. Moments of silence were quite rare. Stretchy. Ow. Oh god. Okay, hold on. I need to properly stretch. I've been sitting in a chair for too fucking long. Alright. Back into the chair. I felt I would only be in the way if I was wandering around the grounds, so I did my best to stay in my room by myself.
部屋にいてくれましたか。
Sanan-san walked into my room without saying anything.
助かりますよ。昼間外に出られると探しに行けませんからね。
Sanan-san? But it's daytime. Are you sure you're alright?
ええ。とてもいい考えが浮かんだもので、一刻も早く君に知らせたくて。
His eyes glittered with something. And even though he was smiling, I could feel the fingers of dread begin to poke at the base of my spine. Why me? Wouldn't you want to tell Kondo-san or Hijikata-san instead?
君でなければダメなのです。私の考えを聞いていただけますね。
Although he asked in the form of a question, his choice of words made it seem far from letting me make a choice. Sana-san started to talk without waiting for my answer.
雪村君、あなたは鬼の一族だとあの千姫という女性が言っていましたね。そして鬼という生き物は筋力も胆力も人間よりはるかに優れている。それは先日豚舎を襲撃した鬼たちの力を思い起こすまでもないことです。
Well, I understand that, but what was Sana-san trying to get at? My heart started to pound, anticipating bad news.
人をはるかに凌駕する力を持つ鬼。その鬼の体に流れる血はやはり人の血よりも強い力を持っているのではないでしょうか。あるいは羅刹の狂気を完全に抑える力があるかもしれません。
I didn't know how the water of life worked, but Sana-san's explanation seemed logical, even if it was a bit manic. How can you know that for sure?
自らが羅刹となる前から、そして羅刹となってからも、この新選組で薬についてずっと研究をしてきたのは私です。落ち水の正体が一体何であるのかは私にも未だに分かりませんが、生き血ではないかと推測しています。おそらく人ではない何者かの。
Don't worry, when we get to Edda Blossoms, we're gonna learn a lot more about the water of life.
もしかすると異国にもあなた方鬼のような生き物がいるのかもしれませんね。
So, Sana-san drew closer to me without making a sound.
少なくとも試してみる価値はあるはずです。あなたの存在で我々羅刹隊 新選組大使全員を救うことができるのかもしれないのですよ。
待って。Sana-san's eyes had grown painfully sharp, and I almost thought I could hear the barest edge of madness in his voice.
さあ。
Calmly, he drew his sword from its scabbard. There was no madness or bloodlust to his movements, and it only made them all the more terrifying.
怖がる必要はありませんよ。あなたを殺すつもりはありません。ただほんの少しその血を分けてもらえるだけで良いのです。
I took a step back, or two. Sana-san and his sword came closer. He lifted it, and the steel blade shimmered in the light. Then all of a sudden, just then,
おい、サンナンさん、何してやがる。
Hijikata had burst into the room. Then,
これ一体どういうことだ。あんたともあろう人が豚書の中で刀を抜くなんざ気でも触れたか。
Hijikata-san.
ああ、土方君、ちょうどよかった。君も手伝ってくれませんか。我々に協力してもらえるよう、何としても彼女を説得しなくては。
With calm purpose, he stepped between Sana-san and me.
刀を収めてくれ。私の闘争を許さず、たとえ幹部だろうと局中ハットは絶対だろう。
Sana-san glared at Hijikata-san begrudgingly for several moments, but he soon turned away and sheathed his sword.
で、一体何があったんだ。雪村が何かやらかしたのか。
タイのため、羅刹の狂気を抑える方法を探っていたのです。
そのためにこいつを切ろうとしてたってことか。
殺すつもりはありませんよ。血を分けてもらおうと思っただけです。先日の戦いで我々は多くの羅刹を失いました。羅刹ではない一般の大使も同じく。今いる羅刹やこれから羅刹となるものをより有効に活用するには、何としても狂気を抑える術を見出しておかなくてはなりません。聡明な君ならば理解できると思いますが。
さっきも言ったじゃねえか。新選組において死闘は厳禁だ。どんな理由があろうと大使同士の流血沙汰なんざ許すわけにはいかねえ。
雪村君は大使ではありませんが。
大使じゃねえがずっとここにいるんだ。似たようなもんだろうが。
They continued to stare for a while, neither willing to budge on the matter at hand. Sana-san sighed.
相変わらず君は優しすぎますね。いいでしょう。ここは引いてあげます。ですが覚えておいてください。もしこのまま落ち水の副作用を抑える術が見つからなければ、新たに羅刹となった東堂君も血に狂って苦しむこととなるのですよ。
Only after I heard his footsteps fade away down the hall did I begin to breathe again.
大丈夫だったか。
Oh. Thank you for helping me.
礼には及ばねえ。ほら、三男さんに大気を守らせただけだ。前は俺にあんなことを言わせるような人じゃなかったんだがな。
I looked down. It's true. Sana-san had been acting strangely lately. He would have never drawn his sword as aggressively as he just did before he drank the serum. I'm sorry.
どうしたいきなり。お前が詫びることじゃねえだろうが。
Well, the reason why Sanon-san was acting the way he did in the first place was because Kazuma destroyed the Fury Corpse. After I said this, Hijikata-san paused and reflected to himself before responding.
お前何か勘違いしてねえか？
え？
あいつらは薩長の一味、つまり俺たちの敵ってことだ。敵が来たら視力を尽くして戦うのは当たり前だろうが。
He spoke with so much conviction, but it's none of your responsibilities to protect me.
じゃあなんだ？あいつらの方が俺たちより強いから、お前を奴らに差し出して命乞いするべきだってのか？そんなな武士のやり方じゃねえ。少なくとも俺たちは一度決めたことをてめえの都合でコロコロ覆すような、そんな腰抜け連中を目指してるつもりはねえんだ。
Hijikata-san was so confident with what he was saying, and I felt there was no real contention to his claim. Even if he wouldn't say as much, I'm sure he knows that kicking me out of the Shinsengumi would make their lives so much easier. But if they did that, it would be a violation of the values they prided themselves on upholding. I'm sorry if what I said was out of line.
詫びる必要はねえって言ってんだろうが、何度も同じことを言わせるな。
Hijikata-san said this timidly, muttering under his breath before looking down in my direction.
もしまた今日みてえなことがあったら、遠慮せずに俺に言え。山崎や島田を通して伝えてくれてもいい。
Alright, understood. Hijikata-san nodded and turned to leave, but I realized that I had one thing left to say.
なんだ？まだ何かあるのか？
There were so many warriors who were injured as a result of the attack on the compounds. Sarta-san hadn't been present for long recently, and Kondo-san was occupied with his meeting with the Bakushin. Similarly, I had a feeling Hijikata-san was feeling the pressure of all of his duties already. I wish that I could be helping him in some capacity, but I might get in their way.
おい、どうした？黙っててもわからねえぞ。
I want to help. Is there anything I could help you guys with? It could be anything. Please, just let me help.
手伝いだと？
He followed his response with a sour expression that intimidated me. Well, had he become upset by my question? Perhaps I shouldn't have said anything at all. No, if I back down now, nothing will change. Please, it could be anything small. The silence stretched out so long, I thought I was going to scream.
大使が行くよりは目立たねえな。
え？
筆と紙だ。
え？
筆と紙を持ってこいっつってんだ。お前の部屋にはそんなものもねえのか。
Right away! I scrambled across the room, grabbed a brush and paper, and handed them to Hijikata-san. He took them silently, still scowling, and quickly began to draw. A map? What is that? He ignored me and continued drawing.
斎藤が三浦の警護で天満屋に詰めてるのは知ってるな。あいつに渡してほしいものが届けてきてくれ。
Something almost fell. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Do you think I can?
なあ、大使に行かせると目立っちまってしょうがねえからな。お前なら怪しまれることはまずねえだろう。任せて大丈夫だな。
Of course, sir. I was thrilled to help, of course, but I was even more ecstatic to be given a task especially suited to me. However, that does put a lot of pressure on me.
こいつが地図だ。これを見ながら行きゃ迷子にはならねえだろ。
Right, thank you. The map was pretty straightforward, but I still barely knew my way around Kyoto. Without it, I likely would have gotten lost. Alright, I'm going. I turned to leave, and only a concerted effort kept me from skipping towards the door.
おい、手ぶらで行ってどうするんだよ。届け物だっつっただろうが。
Whoops. Sorry, I got carried away.
たく、久々の外出だからって浮かれすぎだぜ。そんな調子で大丈夫なのか。
Of course. I'll do a great job.
これが斎藤に渡す書状だ。浮かれて落としたりするなよ。
I'll be very careful. Is there anything you want me to tell him?
特にね、必要なことは全部書状に書いてある。
Understood. Then I'm off. This time I wasn't able to fully subdue the urge to skip. But even as I hurry, I have to be careful. Still, I wonder if it was really okay for him to trust me with all this. Confirm with Hijikata. I wanted to confirm the sliver of doubt I had in myself, so I peeked back in around the sliding door.
行ったか。おい、山崎、島田。
はい。
お呼びですか、副長。
今、雪村を斎藤のところへ使いにやった。気取られねえようについていって、何かあったら守ってやれ。
承知しました。
三浦絡みで、薩長やら土佐やらの浪士連中と切り合いになっちまうぐらいならまだマシだが、あいつは厄介なのに狙われてるからな。もし鬼に襲われるようなことがあったら、一目散に連れて帰ってこい。
はい。それでは早速行ってきます。
ああ、頼んだぜ。
Oh. Maybe that meant he didn't quite fully trust me yet. Of course, I was a little disheartened to hear that, but maybe that was the best I could ask for. I pulled myself together, made sure I had everything on my person, and I left to deliver Saito-san's letter. First, I slipped the letter into my kimono and I double-checked to make sure it wouldn't fall out. Next, I carefully unfolded the map Hijikata-san had drawn out for me. Hijikata-san placed enough faith in me to get the job done, so I had to be sure I did things correctly. Okay, so I go this way on this street. According to this map, it looks like I have a long way to go. I better hurry or it's going to be evening by the time I get there. Maybe I should run there. I wanted to ensure I take all safety precautions, of course, but I was overwhelmed with a sense of duty to the point that I couldn't help but feel running would ensure I'd complete the task on time. I think this is the place. I checked the house number etched onto the lantern that was posted in front of the building. I was sure I had arrived at the correct location. I had been told earlier that Saito-san had taken a room under the name Yamaguchi. Sumimasen. I have business with a person who is staying here. After speaking with the clerk, Saito-san came out shortly after. I mean, Yamaguchi, sorry for bothering you.
雪村あんたが来たのか。
One of his eyebrows shifted up fractionally in response to my presence. Clearly, he seemed surprised. I'm sorry you got something as I'm sorry you got someone as inexperienced as me.
いや、そんなことはない。少し意外に思っただけだ。そろそろ連絡がある頃合いだとは思っていたが、副長があんたを使いによこすとはな。
Well, I asked if there was anything I could do to help, and He was kind enough to let me help like this today.
だが妙案だ。
It is?
俺の顔を知っている他の大使を使いによこせばこの場所を知られてしまう。かといって昨日今日入ったような新参の大使をよこすわけにもいかん。どこかの患者かもしれんからな。疑われることなく使いに出せてどこの息もかかっていない人間。さすが副長だ。これ以上の人選はありえん。
Saito-san's explanation made me realize how much Hijikata-san had thought this plan through. After I made the request to help him, he had considered all of this and gave me the order. Hijikata-san truly has a brilliant mind.
では書状を。
Of course. I pulled out the letter and handed it over. He tore it open and read it over quickly, then lit it on a nearby lantern and watched patiently until it was nothing more than ash. Saito-san.
山口だ。
Yamaguchi-san. Are you sure it was okay to burn it?
もう目は通した。こんなものをいつまでも残しておくと誰かに読まれぬとも限らん。
Of course.
役目ご苦労だったな。感謝する。
Oh, well, just doing my job. No need for thanks. I certainly hadn't done anything very impressive because anyone could have done it, but it did feel nice to be thanked. I was useful to everyone. Now that the job was done, though, I wasn't quite sure what I should do next. I should return to the compounds immediately. Although I was given permission to leave for this mission, I still am not permitted to go outside. Alright, I'm heading back.
ああ、気をつけて帰れ。
As I was running towards the compounds, I knew I had to be conscious of my surroundings. I knew, too, that Yamazaki and Shimada weren't too far behind me. I felt bad knowing they were responsible for me, and I stopped in my tracks. Yamazaki-san, Shimada-san, I know you guys... Are you guys here? No response. But I knew they were there. And I'm sorry. All because I wanted to be of use to you guys. I've put you through so much more than you would have wanted.
いや、そんなことはない。これは副長の指示に従っているだけだ。迷惑とかそういう問題ではないんだ。
そうですとも。先ほどの斉藤さんの言葉にもあったでしょう。雪村君だからこそ意味がある任務だったのです。
Do you guys really think so?
ああ、俺はそう思う。
Thank you in advance. You two have always supported me, and you've helped me at every turn. I have a feeling I will continue to cause you two to work hard in the future as well. So, thank you in advance.
迷惑などと思ったことはない。君の気持ち、確かに受け取った。俺たちの方こそ、これからもよろしく頼む。君はもう俺たちの仲間なんだ。だから、遠慮はするな。
ええ、そうですよ。これからもよろしくお願いしますね。
雪村君、頼みがあるのだが。
What is it?
今、こうして俺たちが君の前に出てしまったことを忘れてほしい。本来は君を影から守っていることになっているんだ。
そうでしたね。俺としたことが。
Ah, I understand. Let's just say I went straight back. I'll be on my way then.
では、よろしくお願いします。
安心してまっすぐ屯所に向かってくれ。
I ran towards the compounds. All the gloom sinking my heart felt as if it had been blown away. The Shinsengumi, once solid, now wavered. What would happen to them? What would happen to the Fury Corps? Men were forced to watch as their friends became the undead monsters known as Furies. Was it any wonder why they found themselves conflicted, or that tempers began to rise? Several days later, the order was given to begin the imperial restoration. The emperor would be restored to power, and his court would once again rule the nation. The position of shogun would be abolished, and Kyo's military and judiciary commissioner positions would be eliminated. All that the Shinsengumi had fought for and believed in was falling to pieces. Oh, we've reached chapter 5. Alright, let's keep going. We got like 5 minutes left. No, wait, 15 minutes left. I can't tell time. December 1867. The restoration of imperial rule had removed the political power from the shogunate back to the jurisdiction of the imperial palace. The Sacho formed a coalition. The Sacho formed a coalition to assume leadership under this new union. Thus, a new government had started to form. The Sacho began to gain momentum, going so far as to occupy Kyoto with their troops. Not only had the shogunate been stunted politically, but now their forces too had nowhere to return. Although the shogunate commanded a large number of forces, the imperial court dominated any substantial clout once held by the shogunate. It was clear the shogunate was being cornered into a situation from which they couldn't easily recover. Between those attempting to uphold the values of the past and those fighting to move Japan into the future, no one knew which side would prevail. End of the year, 1867. Several skirmishes had been occurring at various cities, including Edo, between the shogunate and the Sacho. An attempt to gain a stronghold in a crucial area, the Shinsengumi was tasked with guarding the Fushimi magistrate. However, it was as though fate were laughing at her attempt at protecting the magistrate. Kondo-san had an assassination attempt on his life. After meeting with the Aizu in the city, he was ambushed on his return to the magistrate. Kondo-san's gunshot wound was on his right shoulder. The bullet pierced clean through him, shattering the bone, which required more treatment than I could have given him at the compounds. I was sweeping up the common room when...
おや、雪村君。まだ起きていたんですか?
Oh, Sanan-san. Did you have any business here? If you're going to use this room, I'll leave.
いいえ、構いませんよ。君にも同席してもらった方がいいでしょう。
His words perplexed me, so I felt a little anxious. Just then, the most prominent Shinsengumi captains began filing into the common room. What were they about to discuss? My anxiety was starting to grow stronger.
みんな揃ってるみてえだな。
沖田君の姿が見当たらないようです
が。あいつには聞かせる必要はねえ。もし掃除に渡しちまったら、身の危険も顧みずに近藤さんの仇を取りに行くに決まってるからな。
それが彼の望みならば、そうさせてあげるべきなのでは。土方君は 相変わらず優しすぎますよ。
俺たちに一体何の用なんだ？いつ戦が始まるかもわからねえ今わざわざ呼び出したってことはまさか。
そのまさかですよ。君たちにどうしても渡しておかなくてはならないものがありまして。
In his hands was an object wrapped in a fine cloth that he slowly unwrapped before all of us. As I saw what was inside of his hands, I gasped and clasped my hands over my mouth.
それは落ち水ですか？
その通りです。我々は新選組幹部としてこの薬の研究を受け入れ、今まで実験を続けてきたことについて最後まで責任を取らなくてはなりません。何より近藤さんのように怪我をして剣を震えなくなったり、最悪の場合命を落とすことだってあり得るのです。この薬はそんな時必ずや役に立ってくれるはずです。
三男さん、あんた俺たちを薬の実験道具にしようってのか？
今の状況で幹部大使の誰か一人でも欠けては困ると言っているだけですよ。
ふざけんじゃねえ！俺はこんな薬に頼ってまで生きながらえたくはねえぜ。
Nagakura barked his indignation to Sana-san's proposal, and he stormed off.
お守り代わりってところかね。この薬を飲むような状況にならないことを祈りたいが。
Inoue-san spoke softly as his fingers pinched the vial and held it close to his eyes.
お借りします。
まあ使うことはねえと思うが一応受け取っとくぜ。
Both Saito-san and Harada grabbed the vial, and they slipped it into their respective pockets.
土方君、
Up until now, Hijikata-san had crossed his arms and silently observed Sana-san's speech.
責任を取らなきゃならねえか。まあ確かにその通りだよな。
His eyes looked troubled, but he reached for the serum and slipped it into his pocket as well.
それでは今夜はこれで解散とします。私の行為が無にならないよう祈っていますよ。
After Sana-san had finished, the captains all bowed and left the room, and Sana-san turned towards me.
雪村君、分かっていると思いますが、今夜のことは他の大使には決して口外しないように。いいですね。
Timidly, I nodded my head, and Sana-san waited for a second before nodding silently and leaving the room. What could I do? The serum created by my father was now in the hands of the captains. I shuddered at the thought of them drinking it. The common room was particularly deserted. The common room was practically deserted, and the mood was somber as we listened for updates. As I left the common room, I walked past the courtyard to head to my room. I found Yamazaki-san standing alone in contemplation. He gazed longingly into the sky, as if searching for answers amongst the stars. He didn't seem to notice as I walked closer to him. This seemed rather out of character for Yamazaki-san. I softly spoke to him so as to not alert him. こんばんは、Yamazaki-san. Is everything okay? As I'd spoken out, Yamazaki-san finally turned to acknowledge me nearby. He glanced in my direction, and his expression remained stern as he looked into my eyes.
いや、なんでもない。 俺はこれで失礼する。
With that said, Yamazaki-san walked off. I wonder if Yamazaki-san is alright. I was, of course, concerned about him, but tonight, there wasn't much room in my heart for concern. I rushed back to my room.
局長を襲った刺客の正体はまだつかめないのか。
どうせ薩長の奴らに決まってるぜ。卑怯な真似を。
Ever since the attack on Kondo-san, the atmosphere of the Fushimi Magistrate's office had been tense, to say the least. I felt it increase as I stepped into the meeting room, carrying tea for the captains. Here's your tea.
お、ありがとうな。そこに置いといてくれ。
I seemed to have walked in on a serious discussion. All around the room was tense, drawn faces. All around the room were tense, drawn faces.
で、今後どうするつもりなんだ？薩摩の奴らは政権返上だけじゃ飽き足らず、徳川家が持ってる領地も何もかも返せって言ってやがるんだろ。どう考えても戦を始めるための口実作りとしか思えねえぜ。今のうちに戦う準備を進めておくに越したことはねえ。
だろうな。奴らは年若い天使様を担ぎ上げて我が物顔で朝廷に出入りしてやがる。で、そいつらとの戦の準備をどうするかだな。
三男さんは羅刹隊の増強を主張してらっしゃるようですが。
A memory of the other day came back to me. Son and son offered the water of life to all of the captains, and they accepted it.
俺は反対だ。これからの戦は不逞老子を取り締まってた頃とは違う。敵味方入り乱れて戦う中で連中の手綱をうまく取れるとは思えねえ。戦力にはなるが危険すぎるぜ。
だな。何より人道的に見て問題があるだろ
う。では他にどんな策がある？他の者の意見に異を唱えるのであれば代案を出すべきだと思うか。
だから俺らだって考えてんだろ。そんなすぐいい案が出たら苦労しねえよ。
副長はどう思われます？
Ichikata-san furrowed his brow and frowned.
とりあえずもう少し考えさせてくれ。敵の出方を見なきゃ何とも言えねえし、幕府側の意向もあるからな。
Kondo-san's injury had put everyone on edge, especially with the war inching closer day by day. What was going to become of the Shinsengumi, as well as the Fury Corps? December 20th, 1867. It was decided that Kondo-san and Okita were to be moved to Osaka, where Matsumoto-sensei was. Kondo-san had required serious surgery and treatment, while Okita needed to treat his tuberculosis. Only a few people had caught on to Okita's condition initially, but when it came time for him to leave, it was as if a dark cloud hovered over all of us. The departure of these two leaders brought solemnity and sadness to us all. Tensions were escalating in the Fushimi Magistrate. The war could break out at any second. Since the chief had been shot, everyone seemed on edge at every corner. I guess, though, it can't be helped. Despite an intense investigation, no one could pin down a suspect. This only served to frustrate the soldiers further. Since coming to the magistrate, however, it seemed like the only way I could contribute was to make rice balls, or yuzuke, for the men to eat. Yuzuke? What is yuzuke? But since everyone was constantly occupied or on the move, gathering a group to eat was hard. I found myself with nothing to do after cleaning up the kitchen after dinner.
雪村か。
Yamazaki-san. A sharp voice came from behind me, and there stood Yamazaki-san in his ninja suit. Oh, you must have been out. Wow, you worked pretty late then, huh? I had assumed he was performing his scout duties, looking for any sign of a culprit responsible for the attempt on Kondo-san's life. I bowed to him calmly.
俺のことはどうだっていい。問題なのは雪村君のことだ。
Hmm?
なぜまだ今日に残っている。ここはもうすぐ戦場になるぞ。
Yamazaki-san inhaled deeply, and he continued with a reserved expression.
君は近藤局長や沖田さんについて大阪に行ったとばかり思っていた。
Ah, that explains his surprise. All right.
俺があえて意見せずとも土方副長は必ず君を戦場から遠ざけると思っていたんだ。
There was a hint of stress in his tone, and his exhaustion was coming through.
今の副長には雪村君を気にする余裕がないのかもしれないな。
Anyway, perhaps that is the case. Since Kondo-san was shot, Hijikata-san has been all over the place. I nodded and he immediately resumed speaking in a serious tone.
今からでも遅くない。君は近藤局長たちの後を追い、大阪に向かうべきだと思う。同行に許可が必要なら、俺が土方副長に掛け合ってくる。
There is no need. I'll be fine.
何が大丈夫なものか。
He raised his voice, his frustration gaining.
君の事情は知っている。高堂さんも見つかっていないし、今日に残りたいのは理解できる。君が鬼と呼ばれる者たちに狙われていることも、新選組がその君を守ると決めたことも分かっている。
Yamazaki-san, I had never seen him in this infuriated state, let alone show this much emotion.
だが、今日は次期戦場になる。とどまるのはあまりに危険だ。
Just from the way he'd been flailing his limbs and gesticulating, I could sense he was upset. So it's true. We're going to war. I'd known it was coming, but now war was finally at our doorstep. I muttered this to myself, and Yamazaki-san grabbed a hold of my shoulders as he responded.
まず間違いないだろう。体内にも楽観視している者はいるかもしれないが、例えば薩摩藩陣営はこの伏見奉行所に対しても大砲を設置し始めている。
What?
薩長軍は士気も高い。数に頼っている幕府軍では苦戦を強いられるだろう。
The possible outcome Yamazaki-san was describing were both pointing to one thing: devastation. I was sure that Yamazaki-san still held some hope that the shogunate was superior to the Satsuma or the Choshu. However, because he'd witnessed their preparations firsthand as a scout, his perspective was better than anyone's.
加えて薩摩藩は最新の銃砲を備えている。局地的な戦いの結果は俺にもわからない。
Although I'm sure Yamazaki-san made an effort to comfort me, he was very obviously shaken.
しかし勝つのは我々だろう。動員数では幕府側が圧倒的だ。それでも万一ということがある。だから君は大阪行きの準備を。
待て! Yamazaki-san was rushing through his attempt to convince me, but I interrupted him. I'm not the only one in danger here. Any one of us could be at any time. Besides, you of all people should be careful considering you keep going into the enemy lines. That's almost asking for danger to happen.
俺のことはいい。だが、君が戦いに巻き込まれる必要はないだろう。
Yamazaki-san smiled wryly before sighing deeply.
俺には新選組のために危険を探るという役目がある。いざという時は死ぬことで味方に脅威を知らすのも任務の一つだ。
What?
そんな顔しないでくれ。俺は観察方についたあの日から命の使い道を決めてきたんだ。
There was so much to say, but I couldn't collect my thoughts quick enough. Then, I became desperate to tell him something, but the words froth, they struggled to come out of my mouth before. Then, why don't you go to Osaka, Yamazaki?
落ち着いてくれ、雪村君。どうして俺が大坂に？
You're the Shinsengumi's doctor, so you know everyone's condition better than anyone. His eyes grew wide in surprise as I continued. The men going to Osaka need your help too, Yamazaki-san! I want you to be beside Kondo-san and Okita more than anything too! I wanted him to know that he was worth more to us than just being a lookout in the city. I knew my voice was teetering on the edge of being irrational, but I had to tell him because I didn't want him to stay in a dangerous place. Immediately, Yamazaki-san began to calm down, and he responded in a peaceful tone.
大坂には松本先生が待っている。彼らを見るなら俺以上に適任だ。それでも局長や沖田さんが心配なら、なおさら君が向かうべきだと思うが。俺を手伝ってくれた君なら十分な看護を行えるはずだ。それに戦える人間と戦えない人間、どちらが残るべきかは明白だろ
う。His words tore through me. I dug my fingernails into my hands as I gripped a tight fist, and I stared back into his eyes. I am aware of what dangers await me. But even then, I still want to stay here. Because... I'm scared to leave you. Being separated from the Shinsengumi is a lot scarier than being dragged into a war. All I think about is if everyone was okay, if they were safe, or worse. If war breaks out, then I'm sure you guys will be in need of any help you can get. Although I may not look like much, I too can treat the wounded. Yamazaki fell silent, and I continued. Besides, if you're going off to fight, Yamazaki-san, then even more reason for me to stay. I made a vow with you in the past that I'd watch over everyone when you're away. Yamazaki-san dropped his shoulders as he sighed, responding like he'd given up fighting.
雪村君の気持ちはよくわかる。俺も仲間が傷つくのは嫌いだ。だから危険な仕事は自ら進んで担うようにしているんだが。
Yamazaki-san. His smirk gleamed in my eyes, and my heart squeezed.
また同じことを頼んでしまうが。俺が留守の間はみんなを頼む。
はい。I smiled in response, and he shared with me a small grin as well. Suddenly, Yamazaki-san closed distance between us, holding me closer. He unraveled the cloth around his mouth, and his eyes wrapped me in with warmth by looking at me.
君は強い。
Eh? Yamazaki took my hand and muttered quietly.
こうまで新選組や大使のことを思ってくれる人は決して多くない。互いを本心から案じるのは多くの死地を共に乗り越えながら背中を預け合ったものだけだろう。だというのに今の君には彼らと同じ思いを感じる。
Those feelings. Oh my. Yamazaki-san made perfect sense. I could only wonder, though, if I deserved to be worried about. I mean, is it okay for you to give me the honor of what you suggest?
そんなに謙遜しないでくれ。少なくとも俺は同じだと思った。
Yamazaki-san's words filled my chest with warmth, like fresh tea being poured gently into the cup.
今の雪村君になら安心して傷ついた仲間を任せられる。だが君も俺にとっては大切な仲間なんだ。くれぐれも無理はしないでくれ。いつも自分の身を案じるように。
How could he say that to me? He's the one who's in danger the most. The thought didn't settle easily in my mind. But still, the fact he trusted me so heavily gave me an intense feeling of pride. Wakatta. I nodded. Yamazaki-san nodded back in response, and he slowly loosened his grip on my hand.
俺はこれから土方副長に市中偵察の報告をしてくる。雪村君の話題になってもその処遇について余計な発言はしないようにしようと思う。
Thank you so much, Yamazaki-san.
俺の方こそ感謝している。君のおかげで気が楽になった。君は俺に安心をくれたんだ。だからありがとう。
He smiled timidly to me as he expressed his gratitude. If I had given Yamazaki-san peace, then what he'd given me was meaning. He inspired me to believe that there was something I could do for the Shinsengumi, that I could be helpful to them, and it made me realize there's no way I can let him down. Upon discovering that he accepted me for who I was, it made me confident, an unfamiliar feeling. No matter how uncertain the future could be for me, I was no longer scared to see what's next. And this is where we stop. I wanted to get through that scene at least. But yeah! So, tonight, 8 p.m. EST, we are going to continue our Splatfest activities on Team Strawberry Ice Cream with Splatoon 3. Then, following day, at 3 p.m. EST, we're actually going to continue with more Splatfest because I want to get some more rounds in, and it ends at 8, so me playing Splatoon at 8 for a Splatfest makes no sense. So we're doing that. But instead, at 8, we are going to do Hakuoki Kyoto Wins, finishing this and going on to Edo Blossom, and I will have help with that, and we're going to have a fun dubbing session for this one. Since it's the last one, I already know what's going to happen, so I don't quite care for being perfect with it. So, I'll see you guys tonight. possibly, maybe. And drink water. Have a good day or night. Don't die because you didn't drink water. And I'll see you later. Goodbye.